What's going on, everyone? I'm Ben. Thanks for tuning in to another YouTube video. On today's video, we're going to compare the Royalguard 200 to the Ginault Silent Service. In this video, we're going to take a look at them side by side, how they look on the wrist, and kind of just get a nice little comparison between the two. What this video will not be is a detailed review of the specs of each of these watches. This will be more of an overview of how they look compared to one another in case you were looking at picking one of these divers up. So without further ado, let's get into it. Thanks for tuning in. Alright, so first things first, let's get this out of the way. These two watches are hitting at two very different price points. The Ginault Silent Service is currently priced at $1,299 on Ginault's website for this date variant. The Royalguard 200 was priced at $450. So we're looking at two watches that are in two different price points. The Royalguard 200 being a sub $500 watch, and the Ginault being a over $1,000 watch. Now, with that said, they both are great divers that are in between the sizes of 37 millimeters and 42 millimeters in diameter. They're great options for people looking to get a dive watch and looking to get something that's a little unique and out there and different than a lot of the stuff you're seeing on the market today. So without further ado, let's take a look at them side by side. So guys, first looking at the watches, first thing I tend to notice actually looking down top-down view like this is that the dial on the Ginault appears much larger. What that is, it just has a larger dial opening window that makes this dial appear quite almost as large as the Royalguard 200. This is due to this case being 41 millimeters in diameter versus the 38 on the Royalguard 200. 38 on the Royalguard 200 means it has a smaller dial opening, which is the amount of visible dial you get to see, as well as the fact that it has that domed crystal, so it distorts the dial a little bit. Here we have a flat crystal that allows the full dial fully to the edge of the dial to be seen within the dial window area. So that's one difference to note, and one thing that immediately makes this watch, to my eye, appear much larger than this one. 41 millimeters is only 3 millimeters larger than the Royalguard 200. Now, that may not seem like a lot, but even just looking at them visually here, this watch appears much larger than the other, and you'll see on the wrist how it does feel and wear quite a bit larger than the Royalguard 200. With that said, this is not a large watch by any means. If you're used to wearing a 40 millimeter watch, this watch will fit you great and it will feel great on the wrist. So that's a little bit on sizing. You can see them here next to each other. We'll put them on the wrist a little bit later and you can get a better look at them. But let's go ahead and take a look at sizing comparisons from all different angles. Alright, so I enlisted the help of some markers to get these guys perfectly propped up vertically side by side so we can take a look at the thicknesses. So the Royalguard 200 sits at 14 millimeters thick, and that is including the very large domed sapphire crystal. The Ginault Silent Service sits at 12.1 millimeters thick with the flat crystal. So you get two different sizes here. You can see the cases are relatively thin. They appear about the same size. And you see a slightly smaller crown on the Ginault and a larger crown on the Royalguard 200. Both crowns are engraved, or I guess this one is more so embossed with the Ginault logo. And then you can also, this is a great angle to look at the sizes of the clasps. So one thing to note here from the size though, you will see, and one thing that I have issues with the glide lock on my 6.5 inch wrist is just the size of it. So it takes up a lot of wrist space. What is very nice about a glide lock is that quick adjust that you get with their clasp. A little bit different sizing here on the Royalguard 200, a lot smaller of a space that is taken up on your wrist. So that's one thing to keep in mind, and this is a good angle to see that. As far as the bracelets go themselves, like I said, I'll get into each a little bit later on in the video, but here's a quick look at the two sizes of the watches side by side. Alright, so next up, let's take a look at the dials for these two watches, and let's go ahead and start with the Ginault Silent Service. So the Ginault has a beautiful black dial with applied indices. They're silver indices that are just, they really are very nice. The finishing on them is great. The hands finishing is fantastic. And I love the overall look of this watch. I think it gives a great tool-y kind of military inspired look without sacrificing just the elegance of that dial. I love the red seconds hand. It connects the Silent Service text on the dial, which you can see there, and really brings it all together. I think that overall it's a great design and it's a really nice watch. This is the date version. They also offer a no date version, and it just looks like normal text, no special font. It is not a roulette date wheel. It's just black and white text. But it's a nice feature, and I think they also offer, if you want it with a Cyclops, you can get a Cyclops. But overall, that is the Ginault dial, and it's like I said, it's fantastic. So let's take a look at the Royalguard in comparison. So the Royalguard 200 dial is also a black dial. This is a gloss black dial that has printed indices as opposed to applied. What that means is the gilt printing is directly onto the dial and is not raised above it like you saw on the Ginault. The Imperial watch code text and the Royalguard 200 text is also printed on, just like on the Ginault. The lume on this one is Swiss Vintage Luminova. It is patinaed, or as one would say, kind of vintage styled. Give it that kind of yellow, beige look. The Ginault had BGW9 lume, which glows blue at night, and I'll see if I can do a lume shot for you guys in a little bit. Overall, I enjoy both these dials a lot. I will say that it may just be the crystal on this one, and we'll take a look at the crystals next, but this dial just plays with the light incredibly. The gloss black really is something to see in person. That's the two dials. So while we got this one, let's take a look at the crystals. So the Royalguard 200 features a domed sapphire crystal, and it is a high dome crystal, like you can see in there. It's a lot different than what you see in some domed crystals, where they are very steep on the edges. This one slopes beautifully into the finish. You don't get this kind of boxy look. It's not very boxy box sapphire crystal. It is this kind of perfect dome that goes all the way around. And what the dome crystal really allows is gorgeous distortions as you're looking at the watch, but also it hides the metal separating the dial and the crystal. What this does is it almost makes the dial look like it's right up against that crystal, and it just really makes that crystal or the dial pop. Allows you to kind of really see the dial unobstructed with any of the metal of the case. So that is the Royalguard 200 dial and crystal. Let's take a look at the Ginault. So the Ginault crystal is a flat crystal that barely protrudes above the bezel insert. As you can see, it has those sharp edges that lead to a perfectly flat top surface. What this does is it really allows you to see the dial all the way to the edge, which then does also show, like you did not see in the Royalguard 200, the silver and the metal of the case that separates the dial and the crystal, and what this crystal presses into. So it's just something that keep in mind, that you will see the result on this one. It appears much larger than what you see on the Royalguard 200. What this does is just get some distance between the top of the crystal and the dial itself. So yeah, that is the Ginault Silent Service dial and crystal. Next, let's take a look at the bezels. So both watches are 120 clicks, unidirectional bezels, and I will say right off the bat that the bezel action on the Ginault Silent Service is one of the best I've ever handled. It is fantastic. In fact, let's take a look at it now. So the Ginault Silent Service bezel, like I said, and you can see it here better, is these large groove teeth. They're monsters, right? I mean, they're spaced out, they're deep grooves, and they really allow you to grab the watch bezel and move it. So let's give it a try. It is just butter smooth. It has, no back play. I mean, a little bit, but nothing. It is just so smooth. It is stiff. It is not something that you're going to accidentally kind of turn, but it clicks into each place and lines right up. It is, like I said, it is one of the best bezels actions I've ever tried. The insert itself is a sapphire insert. One thing I have noticed is the sapphire, yes, I love the look of it. I think it's very cool. You get fingerprints on it like no other. It gets dirty, it gets smudges, and you kind of have to clean it to try and, if you want to keep it this glossy look. And to me, that kind of takes away from the toolish appeal of the watch. I don't know, it is very, you know, like I said, military looking and kind of tool inspired, and gives that really great look to it. But then if you're just going to get it dirty and kind of smudged up every second from the insert, it seems like those two kind of oppose each other. But then again, if you are wearing it for a tooly purpose, who cares? It just gets dirty and it adds to the look of the watch. So overall, I love the look of it. It is loomed, fully loomed, which is fantastic. And like I said, that action just really speaks for itself. So let's take a look at the Royalguard 200. So the Royalguard 200 bezel insert also is a dive bezel. Like I said, the bezel itself is this coin edge, much finer tooth bezel than you saw on the Ginault, and what that does is it kind of gives this more low profile when viewing it top down and from the sides. It's not something that immediately jumps out at you like it does on the Ginault, and it speaks to a less tooly look, something I find can be more dressed up and more dressy, but still maintain this diver appearance. The action on this watch is also, in my opinion, fantastic. You get a click at every 120 increments, and it has very little back play and lines right up. So let's go ahead and take a listen. It is still very smooth, very tactile, and it has, like I said, very little back play, and it lines right up as well. So the two bezels are great. I cannot stand here and tell you that this one is better than Ginault. The Ginault is in another world to me, another league. It is one of the best I've ever felt, and that is above many, many luxury brands that I've tried. But this bezel does great as well. It is very secure, very sturdy, and has a wonderful click action as well. So I don't think you'll be remiss with either of these. Next up, let's take a look at the lugs. So the lugs, let's take a look at them both side by side. So the lugs on the Ginault are significantly wider than the Royalguard 200. And that was one thing I really focused on when this watch was the lugs. This one, two different very styles that they're going for. But what you can see is just, if you hold them side by side here, is the taper on the Royalguard 200. Even though they're both lug-to-lug length of 47 millimeters, the taper on the Royalguard 200 goes all the way down to where it's almost nothing and disappears into the bracelet, right? So it goes right on in. Whereas here on the Ginault, you get a shelf, right? So it's much less of a taper, and you get a larger lug. Again, adds to the overall size of the watch. If you're looking for a larger, you know, presence on your wrist, a larger wearing watch, this is going to give you that. It's just it is larger diameter, but then also larger in these areas such as the lugs, which adds also weight. It is heavier than the Royalguard 200. That's not to say this is a light watch. Like I said, it's not a light, cheap watch, but it is not as heavy as this bracelet combined with the Ginault Silent Service head. Both do have chamfers on the lugs, and you can see here that the polished sides of the Ginault are present, whereas the Royalguard 200 has brushed sides of the watch. One thing to note on that, again, is just you're going to get finger smudges there, but again, it's easy to wipe off, and like I said, if you're wearing it, who cares? All right, so finishing up here, let's take a look at the bracelets. So the Ginault Silent Service has an oyster style bracelet that goes 20 millimeters down to a 16 millimeter taper. It has a glide lock clasp that does feature quick adjusts that you can do here via the glide lock simply by pulling this guy up, unlocking it, and sliding it into whatever place you need it to before locking it back down. As I said though, the glide lock clasps in general are larger. They are these larger clasps that take up a good amount of presence on the wrist. So it is, you know, it's something you either give up for, you sacrifice size for functionality. So it's a choice there that you got to make for yourself. Overall, the action of the glide lock is fantastic. It pops up, and it is something you gotta get your finger in here, but it does pop right off. It's very smooth, it's very nice, it is a comfortable bracelet. I will say, occasionally I find like the lug or the links get stuck, as you can kind of see there. Some move more freely than others. That could just be in terms of tightness on the screws, but you can see that some are stiff in terms of differences between the two of them. A little bit harder to move than others. But overall, very comfortable bracelet, and I will finish the video with them on my wrists. We'll take a look. But overall, great bracelet. I enjoy it. It is heavy, it's solid, it's fully solid all the way through and through. That is one thing to note. You do not get drilled lugs here on the Ginault Silent Service. So to strap changes, there's no quick adjust, there's no quick release here on the straps. You got to go ahead and get in there with a spring bar tool to get the bracelet off if you want to put this on something else. In comparison, the Royalguard 200 bracelet is definitely lighter. It has better articulation in between the links. They move a lot more freely than I saw and you experienced, at least on this Silent Service model. Again, the Royalguard 200 does have drilled lugs, so quick, easy strap changes there. I would say it has a little bit of an edge on the Ginault there in terms of if you want to put this on a different strap. The clasp itself is a flip lock clasp, so it has a flip lock, and then instead of just being a pull here, it has a 2 push button release. It is milled just similarly. It does not have the glide lock feature of the Ginault. You can't move this quick and easily in terms of without any tools. You do need either a toothpick or some sort of spring bar tool to pop it in and out and go between these 4 micro adjusts here. With that said, it is still a great class that is easy to use. The bracelet itself is very nice, and like I said, you'll see it on the wrist. 2 different style bracelets and 2 very different feelings. So overall, great bracelet options from both. Without further ado, let's go ahead and put them on the wrist and see how they compare. All right, so starting with the Royalguard 200, here it is on my 6.5-inch wrist. Like I said, they both have a 47mm lug to lug width, and this one sits at about 38mm wide, and you can see here those really heavily tapered lugs just disappear into the bracelet. Yeah, the bracelet fits great on my 6.5-inch wrist. It, like I said, has a lot of links to play with. I have it a little bit loose here, but overall, there's the bracelet. You'll see here when I wear the other one, the comparison between the size of the clasp here, it doesn't take up too much of my underside of my wrist here. It has a good amount of movement. I can really get it around, and you don't see a lot of it on either side when you're viewing the watch. For example, you see a lot of bracelet here. You don't see a lot of clasp. I tend to like that. I like that it is mostly just bracelet and the watch. To me, the clasp is more so a functionality. Yes, it is engraved. That's could be pretty for some, but overall, it's a functional item. The bracelet and the watch itself are kind of what you're looking at. So here you get the visual appearance of that. In addition, the brushed centers and the polished outers really, when the watch is all together as a whole, bring out those chamfers, bring out the gloss of the dial, and really kind of elevate the watch, in my opinion. As I said before in a previous video, if you don't like the gloss, you can simply brush it out with a Scotch-Brite pad. So overall, that is the Royalguard 200 on my 6.5-inch wrist on the bracelet. Let's see the Ginault. All right, and here is the Ginault Silent Service on my 6.5-inch wrist. As I said, and as you can see, much larger wrist presence. It sits at about 41mm in width and really takes up a lot more substantial space on my wrist. That said, I still think I can pull it off. I still think it's a great watch. It is a lot heavier. It feels heavier on my wrist. I will say, after wearing it all day, I feel it. I know that it's there. It's not something that I'm just gonna forget that I'm wearing my watch. I know it's there. It feels very tooly, very militaristic. I feel like I could wear it into battle if I needed to. It is a solid watch. And as you can see here, the Oyster bracelet complements it very well. Like I said, the larger lugs here, they show, but they're not unappealing in any way. Those chamfers really are nice, the gloss sides. And then you get down, and like I said, with you see bracelet, but you also see clasp here, because the clasp, this glide lock clasp, takes up the full underside of my wrist. I said this is not going to be an issue with someone who has larger wrists, but if you have something smaller than a 6.5-inch wrist, per se, I would say that you have the potential for it to kind of hang off the sides. It is so large. Like I said, what you get in terms of that is the functionality of the glide lock feature, but you sacrifice size on the underside of the wrist. Overall, very, very nice watch, very, very nice bracelet. It is a wonderful combination. I would have no qualms with recommending this watch to anybody. It is a fantastic watch. So that is the Ginault Silent Service on the wrist. And the last thing we're going to do is put them down and do a quick closing and maybe take a look at the Lume if I can get a chance. All right, Thanks, guys. All right, guys, so last thing we're gonna do is take a look at the Lume. Let's take a look and see how the two compare. We're looking at BGW9 on the Ginault Silent Service versus Swiss Vintage Super Luminova on the Royalguard 200. So there's the two. That's what you get. You got blue on the Ginault Silent Service. It is loomed on the bezel insert as well. And then you also get the numerals as well as the hands there. On the Royalguard 200, you're getting the dial and then the lume pip on the bezel insert. So those are the two watches. Here they are side by side. They both glow very bright, two different colors here, but overall you're going to be able to read them each at night. And both look cool at night too. Like honestly, just the two designs are very, very unique and interesting to look at night. It's not something that you're just your generic kind of sub, looking watch. They both have their own visual appeals. So those are the two watches. Let's go ahead and do a quick closing. Regarding availability for these watches, the Ginault Silent Service is available for order on Ginault's website with a 6-week lead time. Again, its price is going to be $1,299 for that date variant, and it has about 6-week lead time that it could potentially take for it to be produced. The Royalguard 200 is currently sold out, and unfortunately there are no plans to create more of this exact model, but I will say stay tuned, as I said, very exciting and future projects in the works. Thanks for tuning in. If you guys need anything, please do reach out. I look forward to doing more of these videos, and thank you so much for the support. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel, make sure to subscribe, and thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys next time.